Welcome back to another episode of Growth Unlocked Beyond Scale. I'm absolutely stoked to have our guest today, Ryan. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Real pleasure to be on here today and have a chat.
Perfect. I'm super excited. Based off our last conversation, I think there's going to be some really juicy insights for our listeners. So let's get stuck in. Ryan, you've transformed Coassemble from a pretty local business to, I guess, a global player in the EdTech space, which is super impressive. I guess, what was the kind of aha moment for you that made you realize Coassemble could actually revolutionize online learning on such a massive scale?
Yeah, I think it's always the genesis story is always an interesting one, because if you talk to different people, some small elements come up, and some as you kind of learn about how we started. But I guess I started in education. I was a teacher for just over 6 years, and I saw the struggle, I guess, of an educator trying to put together what I would call a comprehensive online experience. I think when I first started teaching, we were just kind of moving away from the traditional classroom, which was much more of a lecture experience, and starting to expose ourselves to new technologies that were coming on the market. I'm pretty old, as you can see, with a grey hair. So we're talking, mid 2000s, if that makes sense. And one of the biggest struggles that I identified as a teacher myself, and also then, kind of as I moved through my later stage of my education career, was that it's really educators have the IP, they have the knowledge to be able to build what we call kind of like frameworks for learning, whether it's adult learning, whether it's education at K-12 or high school, university, it doesn't really matter. There's a framework around learning, and they have that knowledge, they have the IP around essentially the subject matter. But what they really struggled with was the capability to then, they're not designers, they're not UX designers, they're not UI designers, they're not graphic designers. So actually transforming that IP or that knowledge into something that was consumable for either a student or consumable for an adult, it's actually a really challenging part of the process. And the early tools were heavily focused on what we would call the professional industry. So people who were doing this as commercially paid, their job was essentially to create online courses or online material. And there was lots of tools that were catering to that section of the market. But I think similar to the Canva story, there was a whole subset of people who wanted to transform their knowledge, as we call it, or create content that were really locked out of the process. So the aha moment for us was like, is the technology progressing in a way where we can harness that technology? And it was cloud-based software at the time, to really put this tool in the hands of many, rather than necessarily, the few where the traditional tools were focused. So the aha moment was for us was, can we do this? And if so, what does it mean? Does it mean that everyone can create a course? Can everyone transform their knowledge? That's a pretty cool vision if you take that global. So that was kind of where we kind of centered around how do we tackle that problem? And the aha moment was when, yes, we can. There's cloud-based tech out there. If we build a tool, get it in the many's hands, what can they do with it? And I think the last part of that story is when we saw people who had never designed an online course before, creating courses, we're like, there it is. We kind of done it. And I guess that viral message was something we were really excited about.
That's going to be pretty exciting, right? As a founder, someone that's building a product that you're actually seeing, teachers and educators come in and starting to, pretty quickly figure it out. So it's a good sort of litmus test around, hey, there's actually, a good product market fit here, and it's easy enough for people that don't know anything about design or creating content to start building their own courses.
Yeah, and I think we focused early on in the education sector because of the bias that both myself, Jude, the co-founder, we both had an educational background designing for tertiary K-12. But what was really cool actually in the early days was one of our best and first customers that broke the barrier into the adult education space or the corporate tech space was actually Starbucks. And it's a hilarious story. We signed them for like $99 a month. And, there was one team, we didn't have the whole of Starbucks, but like one team who had been locked out of that process internally, the HR teams creating really high level content, and they just wanted to be able to create courses for their teams. And they come on and they started using it in what we would call the adult education space. And we hadn't yet really formally thought about that as a market for us. We were actually still focused on teachers and educators. And that was a big switch for us in, this tool is a little bit more broad than traditionally just educators. And, what started with that in mind, here we have a rather large business, but we have team members in that business who have been locked out of the process as well. What does that open up for us? So I think, there was kind of two frames where we started with the concept of anyone in the education space transforming content, but quickly realized that the education space spans across the market into HR and, kind of L&D. And we figured that our tool might actually fit there quite nicely.
Yeah, so it's looking at how customers are actually using the application and then using that as a way to think about sort of what does the product roadmap look like and how can we evolve based off what our customers' needs are.
Definitely. And I think we started with Intercom back in the day, tool for live chat, essentially. We were one of the earliest, and hilariously, they've still got us on legacy pricing, which I'm sure they're not happy about. But basically, we started with the openness of live chat on our website and in the application. We wanted to hear from customers. We wanted to hear where their problems were. We wanted to hear essentially how we were solving those problems. And in the early days, we were doing a lot of conversations around, oh, wow, like we used to pay thousands to do this, or wow, never been able to do this without outsourcing it to HR. Or you were kind of hearing the same, I guess, messaging coming back. And we were hearing that the tool itself, from a course builder perspective, had started to transform internally what someone could do, the speed that they could do it, and the money that they were saving. And they were kind of like three nice things to have when you go to market, because it's validation in some regards. I think we didn't yet know where the product could go, and we were sort of going, okay, we have the basis of the course builder. That's a really nice nugget to start with. What's going to come off that? And at that point in time, I think we were probably still guessing, but we had a nice base around the understanding that we need to help someone transform existing IP, whether that was stuck in a document, stuck in their head, or stuck in someone else's head, into an online experience that actually made people smile. And I think the last part of our story is that, we're now known as the colorful and bubbly and good-looking platform. And in the early days, there were a lot of what I would call, I don't want to hurt their feelings, but really ugly e-learning out there. And I think we tapped into the fact that if your mission is to try and make the learner or the employee also have fun while they're learning, then you've almost got them sold anyway, because their end audience is someone that does a course. And if you're the course creator and I've rolled out a course and the experience is poor, you're going to get that feedback pretty quickly from the employees. And so our tool lives and breathes off the fact that people have to like doing courses, because otherwise, you don't have much of a tool for them.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I guess kind of thinking a bit about, you touched on go-to-market there. Something that I found really fascinating, and one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on the show was, you made a really successful pivot to becoming a product-led growth business, and that growth model has been pretty successful for you. And I think that's actually something that a lot of business leaders would, could only really wish for in terms of how you've made that transition. Let's spend a bit of time digging into that. If you wouldn't mind maybe sharing how that's happened, and I guess during that transition where you felt like you might have been on the brink of something that was pretty game-changing.
Yeah, I think like every founder / business owner, you just make so many mistakes, and Coassemble was no different, right? So like if you think about our core vision and mission, I talk about it hopefully very succinctly. It was, to transform capability to create a course. And we had that on day one. And the funniest thing is that as we start to pick up customers, we get almost an identity crisis over the next 4 to 5 years, where we build what we call an LMS, or a learning management system, to appease a lot of the customers that were like, oh, this is a great course builder, but where's your LMS? Everyone else has one. And we kind of get sucked into building that. And it's a mistake that we now identify very strongly, that although it's been successful and we've got a lot of great customers using that software, and the actual product's built out now to a point where it's very mature, the direction actually took us away from our core value that we were trying to solve, which was that course builder. And there's a reason why this kind of has context in our GTM switch. And as we kind of get down that market, and we're chasing that market, successfully growing via a sales-led model, what we are finding is we're selling to a decision maker who wants an LMS, but at the same time, the actual person that's going to create courses and use the platform is getting shut out of the sales process. And what ends up happening is we're selling to the decision maker who wants bells and whistles and features around learning management across the organization, And then we're being used actually by people who want to create amazing courses for their teams. And it starts to become a bit of a disconnect for us internally, where a lot of the people were coming to our website and with that problem to solve. I want to create a course for my team. How do I do that? And then we're kind of entering them into a sales process and saying, well, let me talk to the person that wants to buy an LMS. And there was a very big kind of disconnect that we could see happening, where the volume at the front door was like, let us try it, let us try it, let us try it. And we had a gate up going, no, let us talk to someone, let us talk to someone. And you're kind of fighting that friction. And I think that could be successful if your product is going to really sell at an enterprise level. We'd quickly identified that we were kind of mid-market. And so therefore, I think what we realized very quickly was our best asset, our core vision, was actually what was loved by our users, but we were selling to the non-users. And the minute we figured that out, I think going product-led, let me just first say, is how I got this grey hair. I mean, that is not an easy challenge, right? It's something that you really need to commit to. And even today, you talk about success. I think we've had some success, but we have so much, further to go. The sales model, in a lot of ways, is a lot simpler because it's very scientific. Leads in the bucket, conversion rates at sales point, and product and story and all that sort of stuff, and marketing plays a big role. When you dive off the bridge, as I call it, and start to do kind of product led, your product has to stand on its own 2 feet, and the core concept has to be able to be picked up really, really quickly. And I think we made a number of mistakes. Again, as we jumped off the cliff, we thought we'd go product led with our LMS. And we still hadn't picked up the fact that our core, best part about us was the course maker. And really that's what people were looking for. And we started doing product led with the LMS and started to say, why is it not converting? People are loving the course maker, but we're not seeing them buy the LMS. So again, even when we first jumped off, we still didn't have it right. So I think the message for us is, and we've sat around now and had a few beers and talked about it, but basically, we had a core value and a problem that was being solved in the course making creation capability. And when we figured out that that's actually the piece that we need to go out into the product led motion, that's when things started to tick up. So the idea that someone can come along and create a course, let's think about deployment as secondary, and deployment for us is monetizable, right? So how do you share these courses, whether it's into someone's LMS platform that's not ours, if you need an LMS, if you want to do it by API, like these are all different, what we call deployment methods. And they're highly monetizable, and you do need to talk to the right people in the business to make some of those decisions. But the core value that gets you to those discussions for us was about someone making a course and making it so they loved it and they were able to so quickly share it that they saw value, if that makes sense. They went, wow, that was so easy. I've made my course. Great. Now I can solve secondary problem. Where do I put it? So I guess jumping off the product led, you really need to figure out what is that core value you can add so quickly that someone's got like a couple of seconds, maybe a couple of minutes with your tool. If they can't find that core value really, really quickly, it's a mistake. And I think the last message for us is, as you go to product led, you're not trying to monetize on first experience, and you're not even trying to monetize on second, third, and fourth experience. You're kind of trying to monetize off someone actually solving their problems and wanting to extend their usage, right? And I think when you first jump into product-led from sales-led, you have this kind of bias, which is like, but we have a good lead, so now let's get the money out of that lead. Let's make sure we monetize. And it's actually the biggest thing that stops you from growing that virality, growing the problem-solving component. And you kind of just got to go, no, let's let the tool do a lot for either free or free trial. It doesn't really matter the mechanism, but let's give out a lot of value and let's see if monetization comes off the back of that value rather than trying to seek it on day one. And I think the biggest challenge is you do that flip, especially for businesses that have been on the juice, as you could say, with paid marketing and sales, is like turning that off, and saying to the board or saying to, hey, we're gonna turn off revenue, guys, and we're gonna hope that our product eventually brings value, that revenue comes back. But while they're figuring that out, we're gonna give a lot away, and we're probably gonna let them do a lot of cool stuff with it. And that's a big challenge for any business. And I think that was one that we definitely went through. That's a long-winded answer, but hopefully, gives you the sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. one thing I wanted to touch on there was, you spoke about the importance of delivering value fast for a customer, which is, I think, what it really comes down to. That's the underpinning concept there that I think every business needs to think about. How did you validate that? So obviously, one of the things that I found interesting about Coassemble was I've tried the product myself. I think it's awesome. Not getting paid to say this, but it's one of the best course creation tools that I've come across. Yeah, exactly. You don't need to pay a cent. The way that you go through activation, I think, is really, really intelligent in terms of a 5-step process, which is essentially setting up the platform, building your own course, optimizing it, adding in imagery, using the AI to create copy, etc. And then you need to do that as a gate before you can create a free account, which I was like, I don't think I've ever really seen this from any other SaaS company or product-led business before. I mean, that's really smart. How did you come to that point, and what have been the benefits of doing that?
Yeah, I think we've had, starting off the sales model, one thing you have to work out is obviously you've sold the decision maker, and now you have to actually get people to use your software, right? And so you very heavily focus on what we call onboarding, right? So how do we get someone to create a course and then share that course? Because at the end of the day, our product, if you can't create a course that is of value to you enough to share that with an audience, we don't have anything. So even if the decision maker has essentially sold in the product and bought it, if you don't make courses and share it with your team or share it with your business or your customers or whatever that is, well, our value very quickly declines and someone doesn't renew. And so we spent 5 years working on the secondary problem, which is we've been sold in. Now, how do we get people to create courses of value that they want to share internally? And what we realized, there are a couple of key steps in that. Number one, how do we quickly take information that exists in other places and make it really easy for you to get that in, right? How do we give the tool a really simple process of editing images and things like that? We're not designers, so I'm not here to play with this all day. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on this maybe, or half an hour. So we'd spent a lot of time on UX, UI, thinking about how do we get those admins to create courses of value? Because what we found was whenever anyone had created any kind of what we call a course library, e.g. more than 2 courses of value, and shared that with any kind of audience, our retention was off the chart. We knew that once we'd found that value, someone found the value of creating the content, transforming their knowledge and sharing it, and the feedback loop had happened, right? So we kind of call that 360. It's like I've created it, shared it, and someone told me I learned from it. Okay, value, if that makes sense. The quicker we can get someone there, then we found the stickiness and the retention of the product really went through the roof. If we could not get someone to create content, and we saw this a lot, right? They come in and just upload a PDF, and with no care about the quality of the course, they were very much they were on our churn list because they can just leave us. They have no value in that course, right? They're not wedded to it. They don't care about it. So I think for us, we learned through the onboarding of our customers, over 4,000. How do we do this? How do we make sure that people love our product after the salesperson has sold it? And so what we then did was go, okay, let's look at that and then transform that out into the product-led market. Okay, we need someone to find the value of creating their first asset before they even sign up to an account, which was the thing that you're talking about, which is rare. No one comes on and creates an account. We give the builder, what we call the course builder, to you for free. And we kind of walk you through adding an image, maybe transforming a document, whatever those first steps are. And if you do those processes and go, wow, I now have a course, then I would actually be ready to share that. Well, maybe now it's time to create an account because you have what we call first value. You know what I mean? And we blocked it at that point to get not able to share it because we know the secondary value is sharing, and you can only do that from a free account. And what we now know is sharing plus analytics makes monetization. And so we kind of walked through those steps and said, okay, what do we learn from our onboarding experiences? Cut that down into an experience, and let's be really brave and give it to everyone. You know what I mean? And let's be really clear that if you don't make it through that, you should not create an account because what's the point? You're only going to find more of that inside the platform. And so I think what we saw from a lot of models was you just get people creating an account to see what's in the other side, right? It's yep, create an account, let's see what's in there. Activation's so low. that never seen again. You got sales guys reaching out from a free trial, going, hey, how's your free trial going? And you're looking at the mixed panel data going, well, I haven't visited after 30 seconds coming into the platform. Like, it's probably not going well. So we wanted to avoid all of that and say, if we have someone in our free account, they've already found a value, e.g. that they were to build a course, or at least see that they could build a course that they would want to do and share. And so we kind of broke that down to those steps. I think there's a couple of considerations. Like, number one, you give away your free tool to the competitors. Everyone can come along. We have it all the time. People just come along to see what we're doing because it's available, it's free, it's out there, if that makes sense. But for us, we always say, like, if you can't make something you love, no point in coming to Coassemble.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So much to take away from that. I'd love to dig into the part around that sort of transition, obviously going from a sales-led motion to product-led, a lot of change management as well as probably reduction in headcount would have come through that. I think you mentioned previously that you shrunk the team size from 34 down to 6 employees while also continuing to grow revenue, which is no small feat at all. How did you manage that transition, and what lessons did you learn about efficiency and productivity throughout that process?
I think when we decided to do it, we had this notion that we could live in two worlds, right? So we could keep the sales-led motion going, and we could add a product-led motion and kind of merge the two. That was our original thinking. It's not to just jump off a cliff and go, hey, one day we're sales with a team of 8 sales reps and marketing and all that sort of stuff. And tomorrow it's like, oh, the product will just do all of that. Like, I think that's maybe unrealistic in a lot of senses. So we'd planned that it was a transition over time, and we had to kind of decouple our existing architecture and product and open up a new one. And I think what we did was a bit of testing, what I would call hacking around the edges. And so while trying to maintain our sales-led motion, we opened up tests on certain segments of the market. We did AppSumo. We did some things where we were like, okay, this is not a traditional sales model market. Let's see if our product does fly, and let's give it away for, whatever. It doesn't matter because we need to test whether this motion works, if that makes sense. It's creating courses. And we built side products that were like binned 6 weeks later, that were always planned to be binned, but it was like, okay, we're going to try this. It's not going to affect the sales motion. We're going to put it over here on a separate landing page. We had this product called Bites, for example. The whole team spent on 6 months working on this product called Bites. They didn't know internally that I was testing my future go-to-market, but they still had a really juicy product concept to get into. They loved the work that they did on it. And I was able to kind of, I guess, run two sides of the business for quite some time, where we had focus on sales-led product and selling and revenue production, but we were doing what I would call like hacking around the edge testing, if that makes sense. So not just going, hey, tomorrow we're going here and everyone just loses their job and, we're just going to make this conscious decision. That would be crazy. So what we did find over time is that we were talking to our best and brightest staff and go, hey, we have the plan, and we were transparent. In 2020, we want to go this way. It's going to take us time. And they were involved in every test. They saw every single component. And as those guys saw that potentially the business was changing, we were supportive in moving them to a new business where they could use their sales vernacular. They could use their marketing prowess. So it wasn't like, hey, let's just exit everyone and kind of, we had times when we had to let go of people. That's just part of the process. If you're not producing revenue, you have to make hard decisions. But the hope was that we were really trying to say, hey, we're going in this direction and we're trying to make this change. While we're doing that, the market's changing. There's a whole bunch of forces that are coming at us that we didn't realize. But long story short, I think to answer your question is the transition involves either blending, and we kind of started that, but what we realized was you have a product growth team focusing on product-led strategy, and you have a sales team, and at some stage, you have to make the hard call. So it's like you cannot be doing projects and utilizing your product team's speciality and resources and talent in a direction that's not helping your sales and marketing team, because that's going to lead to frustration. And you also can't have a sales model that says, well, I can't sell this if they can get it for free over there. So at some stage, you kind of hit this barrier where you have to make a hard call and say, today's the day where we are now essentially product-led, because I think you can merge for some time. And I think it was smart that we did that because it allowed us to keep good talent and progress them, off out into the business at the right time, rather than just being like, hey, tomorrow we're product-led and stuff the rest of you. Like, that wasn't the approach. And so I let us kind of also grow in revenue and let our customers know that this is happening and kind of put a transition in play. But you do have a finite point where you have to just let go of that and say, okay, we're now here. And I think that happened for us late last year when we're like, okay, we're here, let's go. And I think the major component that I would talk about is because we'd spent so long testing, hacking around the edges, we weren't guessing. We weren't saying, hey, we hope product-led works. We'd already seen a lot of that flow in minor testing, essentially in different market segments, with products that would be built and scrapped. I mean, there's some great products we built that just never made it, but they're all in the direction of where we land today. And then when you turn it on, it's like, oh yeah, we're not guessing. This stuff works. We've seen it work. So, now it's about perfecting it and polishing it, not about designing it, if that makes sense. So we did a lot of the early work about designing the concepts and flows and testing that prior to getting to the day when we make that switch. So hacking around the edging, in my hacking around the edges for me, is giving your leadership team in those areas really exciting projects to work on that they fall in love with, but letting them know that this isn't the final product. We are working towards a final goal. Let's learn from it. Let's figure this out. Let's take what we know from it. But this is going to be scrapped. So like being kind of, pretty transparent about that. I don't think the team loved me at all times during that process.
Yeah, you can't please everyone, right? One thing that I could imagine as a byproduct, or probably even just as an outcome of this transition from sales-led to product-led, is reducing your headcount probably means better profitability, better operating margins, because you don't have salespeople and marketing people on payroll anymore. And that's a good segue into my next question, which is around you've raised capital over a few different rounds, with EVP being involved in a more recent round. Can you share the factors that you think attracted investors to back Coassemble and how this funding has impacted and will impact your growth strategy moving forward?
Yeah. So I think, we've always been an investor-led business. And so therefore we've had to have investors believe in our mission. Two founders didn't have a higher percentage of ownership in the company. So we're a bit of a different story. We come out of another business. I won't get into it, but it means that we've always been investor-led. And I think being investor-led means that you are constantly pitching your vision to your customers, to your investors, and vice versa. And so you become kind of very reliant on the fact that your product has to tell a story. Otherwise, number one, your customers won't use it and buy it. But also, secondly, you're not going to get any investment to take the product forward. So I think for us, we've always talked about a couple of key metrics that always help us on the investment side. And I'll talk about where we're going and how we utilize it and the profitability. But for us, it's always been about, how many people are learning on Coassemble. That's a big one that investors really, tap into, because it's a sign that you've got retention. It's a sign that you've got excitement, you've got market fit, and vice versa. If you've got 10 million learners per month learning on Coassemble, it's not a bad story. So we've always focused on the byproduct that the product actually puts out, if that makes sense, to tell our investment story and say, yes, you can talk about revenue, you can talk about market cap, and they're all very important parts of your pitch. But also, I think when you're a product-led company or you want to go that way, it can't just be about revenue, because it's going to take some time for that to generate. It can't just be about like free users. That's not going to tell the story. I think maybe a couple of years ago it would have. It's like, yeah, we're a million users, but like nowadays it has to align to monetization, right? So for us, how does someone going through a course align to monetization? Means that you're thinking about it using our software commercially. E.g., you're training an employee. That has a value, right? You're selling a course. That has a value. So for us, we've always tied back to our investor narrative that, if we really want to grow and we want to take your capital to grow, it might not always be about necessarily signing X customers. It's about how do we ensure that our product is monetizable, right? Because investment led means that you're probably going to be burning capital. And for the first, 5 to 6 years, that's exactly what we were doing. And that means you're not profitable. And so therefore what you need to return is that one day there's a potential profitability. And for us, that's always been about the monetizable use cases on a course being taken, if that makes sense. And so we try to tie that back. When we make the switch to product led, all of a sudden, as you say, you kind of can become profitable. But I think there's two types of profitable. There's profitable where you might be returning dividends to your shareholders and you're sitting there going, hey guys, we made X amount of money this year and our profit is this and this. And you're talking about it that way. And then there's what I call cash flow profitability, where you really want to be able to put that cash flow back into growth, right? You kind of want to be able to reinvest because, again, you're still telling your investors or pitching that there is a monetizable future if we grow the base. And going product led, I mean, you're not there to sign 5 customers. You're looking for a base of mass usage across a big problem that needs to be solved. And so any investor is going to ask you, great, Ryan, you're profitable tomorrow, you're making $20,000 a month. What does that mean? Like, am I going to get a dividend of $2? Like, they're always still probably going to be looking at what does this mean market share wise? What's the size of the market opportunity? Investors are obviously very important. So I think for us, how we saw the profitability was not necessarily about sitting back and, hey, we're now profitable, let's sit on our haunches. It's like, how do we use this profit to then reinvest into the product itself to build the base? Because at some stage, we have to monetize that base. Now, I think there's the old way, which was like lots of users then figure out monetization. We've been very clear that we know how to monetize a customer on day one. And we know where that money comes from because we've been down that road. So how do we take our sales-led experience? We know there's money in our product. How do we take that on day one and plant those seeds so it resonates from a product-led strategy without a salesperson having to do that process? And I think for us, that's been a big part of convincing our investors to do this. Hey, like, we're going to turn off revenue and do this. That's not an easy sell, if that makes sense. But still making sure that they see value in the market opportunity. And so being able to say, it's all good that we're going to have 10 million courses being done, but if there's no chance of us monetizing that, that's just a vanity metric. It's like, good, great. We've got 10 million people learning on Coassemble, whatever. It doesn't really matter. To an investor and to a business, we're a business, we're all here to kind of try and help make some money for the employees and the shareholders, saying, but if we have 10 million, course learners, or we have 100 million course learners, and a certain percentage of those are internal employees, we know there's a value. And a certain percentage of those are course sellers, we know there's a value, and we need to tap into that at some point and monetize those customers. And so for us, it's always about tying that back and then saying to the investors, well, do you believe in the mission? Because the mission's pretty wide and open compared to, we're going to sell course makers to hospitals and there's 10 hospitals and I need a salesperson to go get me those 10 hospitals because I have built a product for it. And I think that's the big difference. Once you get our investors and say, we want to be course building for the internet. That's a big mission, big vision. That's going to take time and investment dollars to build a base. And do you believe that we can monetize that? Because if you don't, then chances are you're not going to invest in this.
Yeah, it's really great points. And I can imagine that part of these conversations with investors when you were talking about changing your whole go-to-market strategy was what? Like, there was probably some big question marks and a few eyebrows raised. But I know that by now you must have a good relationship with those investors. So they're on that journey with you.
They're working. I hope so. I think there's a second part that I would point out that is, this all sounds nice and fluffy, but in the last 3 years, as the last remaining quasi sales guy, I've had to produce revenue. You can't just sit back and say, hey, this is a la land where we hope this works in the future. As you pointed out, when we went to profitability, it's not about sitting back and going, okay, we're still losing money and we're having fun with this product-led strategy. I needed revenue to go up. And so it's about knowing that, as I spoke about, if you know your monetized products, your founder, hopefully, or someone in your team can plug the gap that allows you to believe in the future vision by selling the monetized product today. And to do that, you have to have, you need to be able to sell something that doesn't truly yet exist, if that makes sense. And you need to be able to do that in a way where you get larger organizations to believe in this concept, to have money that can pay for it. And I think that's a big challenge. Like, to just jump off and go, no revenue and no growth, and we're going backwards, is not what we did, if that makes sense. And so to dive in, I think you have to be committed that I have to prove that it's monetizable today. Even if it's not a sales team selling it, I got to prove it, because I'm over here saying, hey, if we build this base of products, it's going to be monetizable. They're going, show me how. And I'm like, okay, I'll go show you. So you go and find those larger accounts or those deals that a normal salesperson in your business is probably not going to go hunt for. And you prove it, no matter how hard it is, or even if you don't have the resources or marketing, you go prove it, because that then builds revenue. You have lower costs, and this product thing is just growing nicely. And at some point, that intersection is like, we get our first sales rep in that sells $100,000 product off the back of a big, and so, but it's been done. Does that make sense? The investors have already seen it. The team's already seen it. And for us, that was about going and finding a large player in our industry and saying, hey, we've got this tech. We believe it's monetizable. Will you give us a go? And that took me almost 12 months to get, but I plugged in one revenue account. I plugged a whole year's growth from 8 sales reps, if that makes sense. And, maybe unrealistic, but that's the job of the founder is, you've got to go out. If you're going to tell an investor that it's monetizable and it's going to make money down the track, then we've got to prove it, because otherwise, what are you going to say to prove that? So I think that's part of our mantra, is that while the team is focused heavily on product led, I've been able to go out and test the future, if that makes sense. And that's one of the strengths of product led, because I'm not managing a sales team anymore. I've got the capability to go, why don't I go talk to X, really big business that probably has this problem tenfold. And it may take you 12 months to even just get in the door for a meeting. But hey, this thing's climbing and doing its thing. I'm just going to be narrow focused, and I'm going to win this one, or I'm going to win these two, or vice versa. And so I think you kind of have to shoot yourself into the future and go, well, if I'm going to say that our product's going to be monetizable from a sales team at some point off the basis of a really wide product, availability, kind of going to prove that. Again,
yeah, you can't just talk the talk. You gotta walk the walk.
And my experience is investors invest in metrics, sure, profitability, sure, product, sure, but they invest in the ability of execution. Like at the end of the day, if you are talking about, we've got 10 million learners and it's going to be worth X, and it's like, we've heard that a couple of times before. But then you go and go, hey, we just signed X client that has X amount of users, and they paid X for it. So when we get X amount of users, and we've got to say, it's going to be there. And I think that's the big difference for us. We kind of know monetization exists. So how do we get there? But we don't want to monetize a small amount of customers. We want to monetize a massive amount. So there's always two games at play. Building the product led that allows you to have a big chunk of the market loving your core value, knowing that 95% of them, like most companies, won't ever monetize. But inside there's probably the nuggets of gold. And if you can prove that nugget of gold on day one, that it's there, then it's very scalable probably after you build the base. Hopefully that makes some sense. I'm talking nuggets and all sorts of stuff. Hopefully, there's some sort of, clarity in there.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's plenty of learnings. You've touched on this just with that previous response, but I think previously you have mentioned that, and this is something I'm sure investors are looking at, is like, what are your expectations or projections in terms of revenue growth? I think it was 4X that we discussed. What are the strategies and things that you're going to do in the future to be able to achieve that next level of growth for the business?
Yeah, I think revenue growth is one of those things where you can kind of fake revenue growth through spend, right? And I think at times in our business, we've done that by hiring more sales reps or spending more ads on AdWords and vice versa. And I think when you look at the best businesses out there, the really product-led companies that have really accelerated their growth, it's come from when the product value really kicked into gear at scale, right? And so you can kind of go, okay, I'm going to spend this, I'm going to, put in X. But in product led, really the idea is if you really want to maximize revenue, you need to get the foundations absolutely pure. And I think like we could jump out of where we are today and go, okay, let's start growing revenue tomorrow. But I would immediately break, in my opinion, one of the ground rules of product led, which is the value should come from the product being loved and utilizing the use cases commercial. I could go buy ads tomorrow that get more people to build courses in that segment. And what I would be doing is diluting what I would call the foundational element of that product-led funnel. Does that make sense? And so I think for us, we have to nail the basics. We have to nail the experiences. We have to nail the referral, word of mouth marketing. We have to nail all of these, what I would call, like I've got a board, a collection of what I call fundamental aspects that if you look at, Loom, you look at the best in the world at this, you were to do a full analysis, you're going to see these fundamental components everywhere. They might be doing them way more polished than us and vice versa, but they're there, right? So we talk about referral, right? Someone should be able to talk about your product fondly, and that's an aspect of product-led. Your word of mouth marketing is an aspect. If you're not doing that, then product-led's not going to work for you. So I think for us to answer your question, how do we get to 20 or 30 or 50 or 100 million or whatever that next big journey is? To me, it's about the first couple of years getting the fundamentals right and ensuring that all of those fundamentals are at max capacity, breaking point, right? They're at complete breaking point, messy, put together with sticky tape, who gives a shit, like it's there in its most fundamental, pure form, but you have all of the elements and they're breaking. They are screaming for investment. They're screaming for that better, marketing spend. They're screaming for a salesperson because you've got too many leads asking the same goddamn question. Like, you got to be at breaking point, because when you then unleash that break, right, you actually know where you're spending your money. And I think for me, learning out of the sales model, if I go back in time, like I spend the first 2 years on fundamentals. It's not easy to do, but I spend it there because I then know where to put my money for scale. So if we want to get in 20 or 30 or whatever, for me, it's not about sort of saying, hey, let's get a sales rep in tomorrow. I should hold this duty for another year, and really prove out that I make X amount of sales and go, okay, now I'm actually going to have dinner with my daughter. It's time. Let's put that salesperson in, or put 5 of them in, because there's enough lead there and there's enough monetization that we go booming at $1 million per month or whatever it ends up being, right? It's exciting because there's a boom. And I think if you look at those product-led companies, spend a lot of time doing this, and I think I think sales is a very different model where you can repeatedly build a model that edges you up the stairs, essentially, and you can kind of climb like this. Whereas for product-led, it feels more like the old hockey stick, as they explain. But I think that hockey stick, you will miss it, and we might miss it. Like, we haven't seen it yet, if that makes sense. But you might miss it if you don't have those fundamentals in place. And I think we're still at least 12 months away from having every single fundamental at breaking point, where I want to go, you know what? Let me get out of the way, because this thing's a dam and it's about to burst. But if I don't feel like that's the case, then honestly, anything that I start to do to scale revenue, right, is, in my opinion, a mistake at this point in time.
Well, I think you're definitely doing the right things, because you seem to be understanding of cognizant of all those kind of fundamentals, and whether it's sticky tape or whatever is holding them together, like you're getting yourself in that position where you're ready to, let the floodgates open, essentially. Right, just conscious of time.
With 16 members, a lot of it's built with sticky tape. So at some point someone's going to be able to come in and polish that, if that makes sense. And if you believe your product has worth in the future, then don't polish it today. Polish it when you actually have revenue to produce. And that's been something that we had to learn, but I think we've taken it on board.
Yeah, absolutely. To round things out, finally, for the listeners, what actionable advice could you give to other founders or GTM leaders who are looking to scale their business while really trying to stay true to the mission that they're on?
Yeah, it's so easy to be led distracted down a pathway from big customers. Everyone would say this, but it is if you can give anyone coming into the stay with what you want. I was at a wine bar just the other day, and the guy's got this beautiful wine bar, I love analogies, but this is a cracker. Right? And he's got this beautiful wine bar, and I'm sitting at it, and it's in the Blue Mountains, a beautiful spot. And he's there going, hey, I'm thinking we might need to add coffee and breakfast. And I'm like, oh God, here we go. Because like immediately, right, I get why he's thinking it. I can see probably someone said, hey, do you do coffee? And it's like, no, oh, well, we could. Oh, okay, well, away we go. And I think for us, like, yeah, knowing your vision, it was course building, and we walked away from it. We did. We built an LMS, which is great. It produced revenue, and it was a nice story, and we grew. But it was away from our core mission, which was help someone create a great course and easily share it. And I think sometimes it's easy to say, really hard to do. So my advice comes with like, yeah, bro, it's hard to do, but at the same time, like finding out where your value is and sticking to it. And I think the best way to do that is to give that out to your team members and say, hey, is this on value? Like, are we still here? Because, here's a customer that wants this. They're going to pay us $20K. It's like, that's exciting because we need revenue. But if it takes us away from that vision, then is it really good long-term? And I think the last part of that is, as founders, it's so hard to see yourself in 7 years' time, right? Like where the business is. And you're kind of sitting there going, but if I had this 20K today, that takes me to here, and then I can edge up. And I think I'm guilty of it, like not seeing that the path to the bigger revenue is stay on the one you've got, not edging off. And I think that's kind of like the key for me is like, once you know what you're good at, as hard as that is to stay at, try and ensure the revenue you get comes from that core product. Don't let it come from something that's supplementary, sideways to it, because what that does, it's almost fake. Gives you a sense of security that it's there, but it's probably not repeatable because either it's not your expertise, you don't have devotion and care for it, and so you never, and like for us, course building is something we live and breathe for, but LMSs is something like, we're excited by it in some respects, but it's never been our core belief. People buy us because our course make it. And so I think sometimes when we walked away from that, it takes you in a different path. Even though it might be looking good on Stripe, that doesn't always mean that your future business revenue is paying off because of the decision. So I think for us, that's a big one. Like just try to stay with it. And then to combat everyone that would say, yeah, how do we make money? It's about fighting harder to sell your core value rather than try to add on componentry that people want. It's if you believe that you've got product market fit. And I think if you don't have product market fit, then that's terrible advice because you should be listening to what your customers need. But if you do have some product market fit, you'll find that your core value is something of value, then don't walk away from it.
So Ryan, I've really enjoyed the conversation today. Thank you so much for your time. There's been some great insights that I'm sure a lot of founders will take a lot away from. Where can people connect with you? Where can they find you? What's the best way for people to find you online?
Yeah, apart from the local burger place in Newcastle, New South Wales, Australia, you'll find me there pretty regularly, as you can see by my jawline. Coassemble can be found at coassemble.com. You can build your course for free. As you've heard about today, if you can't find value, then don't come back. But, give it a go and see if it can change your customer training or your business knowledge. And we're pretty excited about having as many people come by and find us. I'm on LinkedIn, as is everyone else. And I like to spend a bit of time in the Newcastle community, founders and startups and vice versa. So it can be found hanging out at the local Newcastle university startup place from time to time, working and doing some talks. So yeah, I think, always online, always available, love spending time with founders and telling them all the shit that I did wrong and all the mistakes I've made. So hopefully that's helpful. But yeah, overall, very approachable and love what I do, love what we've done and very proud of what the team's achieved at Coassemble. I think we have a world-class product and I'm pretty excited about how people find out about it, get to know it from here.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Ryan. Really looking forward to seeing your continued success and sharing on from the sidelines.
No worries. Thanks for the time today, Kieran. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Growth Unlocked Beyond Scale. If you enjoyed the show, it would really be appreciated if you can leave a 5-star review wherever you consume your podcasts. And while you're there, why not subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future episodes. If you'd like to learn about how to drive profitable scale in your business, gain clarity on your direction, and improve your business valuation, click the link in the show notes to connect with Kieran.